All right, and welcome back to the Python Institute. This time we're talking about lab number 2.1.2.11. And this one is probably one of the more confusing ones. And that's because we're using escape characters. Again, if you're not too familiar with the escape characters, go ahead and look at the prior lines here, and they talk about how the various escape characters work in your environment. Specifically, in this case, the two escape characters we're going to be using is the backslash double quote in order to show a quote on the screen, and the backslash n in order to do a new line character. Now this one gets difficult because it becomes very complicated with all the backslashes in there. And so for this, we're going to take this one step at a time. So let's see, scenario, write a one-line piece of code using the print function as well as the new line and escape characters to match the expected result on 3 lines. So it wants one print statement to print out all 3 of these. To start off, I'm just going to do just one of those lines, the very first I'm. So let's see, I'll start off with just simply I'm. So single quote M, and I click run, and we'll see that it prints out I'm, which is almost exactly what we're looking for. I say almost because the thing we're lacking is these quotes around it. Well, not a problem. In Python, as well as many other scripting and programming languages, there's an escape character. In Python specifically, it is the backslash key. That's the one right above the enter key on most US keyboards. When I use the escape character, that means the very next character either has a very specific function or it should be passed through as if it's exactly that character. So for instance, if I do a backslash quote, instead of it being treated like the quote up here, which means the start or stop of a string, it means literally print the quote. So if I go ahead and I type in right here, a backslash double quote, it should print out the quote to the console. And you see right there, yes, it printed out the quote to the console. So then I wanted one before I'm, and I want one after I'm, so that means I'm going to print another one right here. Again, backslash double quote. And then go ahead and run, and we'll see that I'm is fully printed. Exactly the way we want it to be in the output. Now this can be very complicated because I've got quote, backslash quote, backslash quote, quote. And if you're not thinking entirely about the whole process of needing an opening quote and a closing quote and then everything inside of it, it can start getting confusing. Okay, so I've got the first line there. Now I want all of this to print out of one line, but I'm going to do it in 3 for the time being. The next one is learning. So I'm going to start off with just print learning. And now if I run it, it should be fairly obvious at this point. It's going to print out the first line of I'm and then the second line with learning. Now in front and behind of learning, I want 2 double quotes. Well, if a single backslash double quote, it printed out a single double quote in front of I'm, then doing that twice should print out 2 sets of quotes. So backslash quote should now print out 2 double quotes in front of learning. Awesome. So let's do the same thing at the end of it. Backslash quote. We run that and we should see the output gives me exactly what I'm looking for so far. All right, so then let's go ahead and do Python. And at this time, I'm feeling fairly confident in what I'm doing, so I'm going to actually I'm just going to write Python with the 3 quotes. So backslash quote, Python, backslash quote. And then I'm going to run it, and hopefully it doesn't give me any errors. It doesn't. I can see my output right down there. So far, we're looking exactly like we want for the expected output, except We want all this to exist on one line. All right, so we're halfway there. Now what we need to do is we need to make all this onto one line. For that, I'm actually going to copy this. So Control C, Control V, and I'm going to put this on a second line or a second section. That way, if I break this section right here, broke, then I have working up here. So what I need to do is I need to make all of these on one line. Now we learned previously that if right here, right there, I put in a \n, then that puts in a new line character. So that means I can delete that ending quote and the closing parenthesis, as well as the print command, this opening quote and opening parenthesis. And I replace them with a \n. That should put them both on the same line. So let's try that. First off, I'll be very, very careful with what I select right here. I just have the one closing quote and the closing parenthesis all the way through the print statement, the opening parenthesis and the opening quote, and I'm going to hit delete. That puts them on the same line, and then a \n. And now if we run this, cross our fingers, and it should still be on two different lines. Now I'm doing this very, very carefully because I know at any point I can make an error, and I want to know exactly when I made the error so that I can go back. All right, so that \n worked for there. So let's do the same thing right here. Again, the last quote and closing parenthesis up to opening parenthesis and opening quote, delete, \n, and I run it, and it should finally come out with I'm learning Python. And it did that all from this one line right here on line number 5. Now, why did I take quite so long to get there? I could have sped along and I could have made this work better, or could have written this out a whole lot quicker than what I actually did. But when you look at this line right here, that gets very confusing very quickly because there is a whole bunch of backslashes everywhere. Some of those backslashes mean print this. Some of those backslashes mean do something else. And so it gets very, very confusing very, very quickly. That's why I did it one step at a time. Now, for those of you who remember from my prior statements that there's very little difference between a double quote and a single quote, you might be saying that this could actually have been done a lot easier. These backslash quotes or backslash double quotes are necessary to be escaped because of the fact that I'm opening right here with a double quote. If I opened instead with a single quote, I wouldn't necessarily need to escape those double quotes. So for instance, I could have actually changed this print statement. If I start with a single quote, because I'm opening with a single quote, opening and closing with a single quote, I don't need to escape the double quotes. I could just simply type in the double quotes and then start off with the I'm. Now at this point, the tick M for the I'm does need to be escaped for the tick. But at that point, that's about it. I do have the new line characters, but then learning new line Python. And it runs just perfectly. So you may notice that sometimes you'll want to use single quotes, sometimes you'll want to use double quotes. There's very little difference between them. In some scenarios, they are more preferable than others, but it may just come down to a case of personal preferences.